Okay, so this is our Unit 5 inverse trigonometric functions notes. So remember, a function has an inverse if and only if it's a one-to-one function. So it means it passes both the vertical and the horizontal line test. So if I am graphing sine of x from negative pi over 2 to pi over 2, remember our cheats are 0 max, 0 min 0, but I don't want to go past here, so then it's going to look like this. Okay, so I'm going to have that function. So the arc sine, so that's the inverse of it, so that means I'm going to flip my x and my y. So this point is negative pi over 2, negative 1, so it's going to be negative 1, negative pi over 2. 0, 0 stays at 0, 0. Pi over 2, 1 becomes 1 pi over 2. So the graph looks like that. Okay, here's my inverse sine, or my arc sine. Cosine. Oh, also, negative pi over 2 to pi over 2, that's quadrants 1 and 4. That's going to come into play when we reverse back. I'm going to graph cosine from 0 to pi. So cosine is max, 0, min. It's going to look like that. And 0 to pi, that's quadrants 1 and quadrants 2. So again, flip it. So 0, 1 becomes 1, 0. Pi over 2, 0 becomes 0 pi over 2. And pi negative 1 becomes negative 1 pi. It's going to look like that. Tangent from negative pi over 2 to pi over 2. Negative pi over 2 is undefined. Pi over 2 is undefined. Negative 1, 0, and 1. Like so. So then we flip it. To get our arctangent. Okay, so again, negative pi over 2 to pi over 2, quadrants 1 and 4 for sine. Also quadrants 1 and quadrants 4 for tangent, and quadrants 1 and 2 for cosine. The reason that that matters so much is because when we go to do the inverse of them, you're going to need to know what quadrant your angle is in so you can use your unit circle chart. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to use that unit circle chart to figure it out. So what you would do is we want the inverse sine of 1. So what I think about is I say, when does sine equal 1? Well, sine equals 1. It goes 0 max. That maximum is my 1. So it happens at pi over 2. And then it goes 0, min, 0. And that's the only place that happens. So the inverse sine of 1 is pi over 2. You're going to find that inverse sines are going to be an angle, whereas the sine of pi over 2 is 1. All right? The inverse sine of 3 pi over 2. So when does sine equal 3 pi over 2? Well, that happens at pi over 3. And where else does it happen? Where is sine also positive? Second quadrant, so that would be 2 pi over 3. But these both don't work because my domain of my inverse function is between negative 1 and 1. And I want to be in quadrants 1 and quadrants 4. So the inverse sine of radical 3 over 2 is just pi over 3. All right, next one, 3. The inverse sine of negative 2. Now, does sine ever equal negative 2? It doesn't, so this does not exist. Okay, it goes from negative 1 to 1. Let's try cosine 1. Inverse cosine of negative radical 2 over 2. Where does cosine equal radical 2 over 2? So that would be pi over 4. So the negatives are in quadrants 2 and 3. So pi over 4, that would be 3 pi over 4 and 5 pi over 4. But you have to go back to where it lies. The inverse cosine is going to be in quadrants 1 and quadrants 2. Well, this is quadrant 2 and this is quadrant 3. So my only answer could be 3 pi over 4. Inverse cosine of 3. Does cosine ever equal 3? It does not, so this does not exist. Inverse cosine of negative 1. When does cosine equal negative 1? Remember, we go max, 0, min. That minimum is at my as that pi, which is in my domain, so we're good to go. Tangents are the last ones. Inverse tangent of radical 3 over 3. Where does tangent equal radical 3 over 3? So that would be pi over 6, which is in quadrant 1 where it's positive, and 7 pi over 6, which is in quadrant 3 where it's also positive. But my angle has to be in quadrant 1 or 4, so the answer here is pi over 6. Inverse tangent of negative 1. Inverse tangent of negative 1. So negative 1, remember we're going negative 1, 0, and 1. So it's negative pi over 4. And that's in quadrant 4. We don't have a quadrant 1 angle. Tangent of radical 3. So it equals radical 3 at pi over 3 and at 4 pi over 3. But I need my first quadrant angle, so that is pi over 3.